Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to be sensitive of everyone's time. Hi, everyone. My name is Faustine Chan. I'm the Business Innovation Manager for BB serving the Pacific Southwest. We've been holding these daily webinars just to give our businesses just useful tools at this time. I know a lot of businesses are shut down right now and they just don't know what to do. So we've been inviting a lot of experts in the business community just to show some strategies that you can start implementing in your business. So when it does open, you know how to, you know, operate your business accordingly, because a lot will be changing, of course. So this webinar is being recorded, so if you do miss any part of it, if you do need to review the information, it will be posted on events.bbcommunity.org. You can also sign up for other webinars coming up on that page and also review past webinars that have been recorded. So we have a great speaker today from the business story. We have Park Howell. He's the world's most industrious storyteller, helping business leaders of proven purpose-driven brands grow as much as 600%. He has 35 years in brand creation, which includes 20 years in running his own ad agency, Park & Company. He was also named Advertising Year in the year 2010 by the American Advertising Federation of Metro Phoenix. The following year, his agency was recognized among the top 10 impact companies in Arizona by the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce. He is also the founder of the Business Story, a proven platform based on the 10-step story cycle system to clarify your story, amplify your impact, and simplify your life. His popular Business Weekly podcast entitled Business of Story ranked amongst the top 10% of the most downloaded podcasts in the world, shares storytelling techniques to help listeners craft and tell compelling stories that sell. So please welcome today's speaker, Park.
Well, good morning / afternoon, everyone. So great to have you here. And I know a lot of the questions on people's minds, and I've been talking to them over the past 4 or 5 weeks as this is going through, is what in the world do I do with my business, with my brand? When do I start selling? How, I've got to stay sensitive to what's happening out there. And most importantly, how to get positioned for the America 2.0 or the new abnormal, as I've heard it discussed. But now is the time to do all that. As I mentioned a little bit before we got started here, gosh, this is a time of introspection. We're locked in our homes, sheltering in place, whatever. We don't have quite as much demands business-wise on us. Now, we may have traded those off for demands of family life and kids and that sort of thing, and I understand that. But now is such a great reset, is to ask yourself that question. What do I stand for as an individual or professional in my world? Or what does my business stand for? And what purpose do I really want to embrace? And especially after this is all over, to build that foundation now, to start building that trust with new clients, with existing clients, with new prospects. And then how can I build on that? When we are in the fog of war and business is just booming, someone once told me even a frozen turkey flies in a tornado. Well, we don't have to pay nearly as much attention to maybe how efficiently we operate, or maybe even our brand story in that case, because business is just coming. Well, now this totally changed. It is a complete and utter reset, and you can take advantage of this. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's session. I'm going to show you 2 things that you can do to get super clarified on your professional and personal brand story moving forward. And then how to tell that. I'm going to share with you a technique that you can use in all of your messaging, but you'll use it to be able to tell your story too. Here's my promise to you. This is not going to be a ZOOMBIE apocalypse. Everyone was all excited about Zoom once they got to working distance from home and so forth. But now I'm saying that people are just getting like Zoom fatigue. And by golly, it looks like a ZOOMBIE apocalypse going on. So I want to make this webinar as interactive as possible. Faustine's going to help me. She's going to be watching the Q&A in the chat room for me. Interrupt at any time to ask any questions. And you hopefully have those 2 documents, resources that we sent out today. One is your What's Your Story Field notebook that you will use that after this session moving on. It's just something to arm you, to help you build your storytelling muscles. And then hopefully you've got the backstory worksheet. And it's that worksheet that we're going to work through today. So if you've printed it out and you've got it handy, get a pen, pencil out, old fashioned, and write down your thoughts as we go through this. Okay. COVID, of course, has completely interrupted all of our worlds. And I never really appreciated it until it hit so close to home. This is my brother, Chris. He's a year and a half younger than me, 57-year-old, healthy outdoorsman, no pre-existing conditions. And he got hit by COVID. He first thought it was allergies, then he thought it was the flu, and then he ended up for 6 days in Swedish hospital in Seattle, 2 of those days in ICU. And had he not gone into the ER when he did, he told me he felt like, in hindsight, he probably had about 24 hours to live. So don't, if you have unbelievers in your life and you don't think it can impact you, believe me, it can. This was a show that we produced on the podcast last week. It is by far, out of 248 shows, my most downloaded show around the world. And I've even heard folks from Netherlands that have reached out to me, from Australia, from New Zealand, that heard this story and go, wow, I had no idea of the impact on it. So that's just something for you to consider. And if you've got a non-believer in your life, share this episode with them. It will make you a believer. Now, although it's kind of doom and gloom out there, there are a lot of opportunities available to all of us. And I want to first take you through a case story about the last time we had a major upheaval in our world, and that was with the 2008 global recession, Wall Street and everything that went down there. I want to introduce you to AVEIN'S Tafoya, one of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. She is a former CEO of Adelante Healthcare. She turned that operation around, actually brought it back from the brink of destruction, and she did it during the worst economic impact at times of our lives back then, between 2008 and 2010. She didn't wait around for things to fall apart. She invested in her people, in herself, and in her brand story. And here's what's happened. She used that critical time to make Adelante Healthcare an amazing story. So we started working with them back in 2008. And the idea was to really clarify their brand story, to position themselves for growth for 2010 and beyond. At the time, they were a 33-year-old community health center, and they were absolutely fighting for survival. Community health center means they give away healthcare available for everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. And they had to change their model around to attract in insured patients to help pay for those that couldn't. So they not only had to attract these patients, they also had to bring in and attract the top doctors, because they had to create an overall continuum of care that would intrigue people in from their existing providers and come to a community health center for their medical care. And they also thought, we're not going to just focus here in Arizona, but we want international attention as an industry leader. We want to shake things up while the entire world around us is being shaken up. So she, pulled her courage out and said, let's do this thing. And we crafted a new story for Adelante Healthcare. We focused it on a very much of a purpose-driven brand story of providing sustainable healthcare for all. This is when green marketing sustainability started coming into vogue, but it hadn't quite hit the healthcare world yet. But we wanted to talk about sustainability and sustaining the legacy of Adelante Healthcare and providing healthcare for all regardless of your ability to pay. We wanted to start encouraging more healthier habits, so sustainability within the house, within the communities. And then we wanted to create more sustainable operations, and that's exactly what AVEIN did with this new story of Adelante Sustainable Healthcare. So they expanded from 4 to 9 clinics. 6 of them are now LEED certified, and they run the only top LEED certified clinic in the country, and it's out in Mesa, Arizona. AVEIN has become an international leader in sustainable healthcare that people seek out, and they fly her around so that she can teach them what they did after getting their brand story dialed in about the sustainable healthcare, how it completely impacted their operations and where they grew now to over 600% growth. And that all began in the same sort of situation that we find ourselves in right now. Our world is turned completely upside down. There's no better time to dial in your brand story. So that's what we're going to do right now. Our first worksheet. I'm going to show you the very first step in how to do this. And as you do this, it's going to start getting you really super clear on what you do differently and more distinctively than your competition. What is your one thing? And this was actually an exercise that I learned out of a book. I couldn't even tell you the name of the book now. It's been that long ago. But I found it in the early 1990s. And I really love this very simple exercise. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to start thinking about, and if you've got your paper there, and I'm going to give you a couple examples. But I ask you 4 questions here. First one is, what industry, at a very high level, what industry are you in? So in AVEIN'S case, they were in the healthcare industry, but so are a lot of people. Johnson & Johnson is in the healthcare industry. Banner Health is in the healthcare industry. Ambulance companies are in the healthcare industry. Doesn't matter. What you want to do at this very high level is articulate, write down, what industry do you operate in? Now we're going to start drilling down into your core specialty. So we're going to talk about first the category. So in Adelante's case, their category was a community health center. Different than other for-profit organizations, different than just clinics out there. They are a community health center, and they have a very specific designation in the nation and their business model about being a community health center. So now we're starting to dial in what category in healthcare do they belong in. So what is their specialty in this? Because there's still lots of community health centers out there. How are they different, therefore more distinctive and more interesting than their competition? In this case, they decided to really own that sustainable healthcare model. So you can see now they're really separating themselves from all of their competition, the for-profit hospitals, the nonprofit hospitals, the community health centers, by coming in and saying, we are going to own sustainable healthcare in those 3 pillars: sustaining availability of health for all, sustaining the individual health of the patients, and sustaining the health of the organization and the communities it serves. So they take this all together, and now we want to write it down as simply as possible. And this next part, this becomes your position statement. Theirs is nice, short, sweet, to the point. Sometimes they take a little bit longer to explain. But let me show you what theirs is. Their number 1 position is Adelante is Arizona's number 1 provider of sustainable healthcare for all. To gain that focus, to get everybody on board and pulling in the same direction, to get providers not only interested in it, but then coming to offer their services at Adelante, to attract the top talent and retain the top talent, and to build their patients, not only those that don't have the ability to pay, that's their legacy, that's what they're all about, but to attract in those that do, those insured patients, and get them coming to these to their services so that they can help support the overall thing. Hugely powerful, and led to that 600% growth. And it all began in the dark times of the global recession, which this can all happen for you right now. Let me give you one other example here, and then we'll open it up to see if any of you have any questions, or if any of you would like to share what you've already arrived at, and we can kind of work through that real quick. So for me, my positioning statement for the business of story, my industry is the communications industry. That's advertising and branding and public relations firms. It's also AT&T, they're in the communications business, movie theaters, Hollywood. I mean, we're all in one way, shape, or form in the communications business, but that's how high level I want you to think, just to start getting you to start dialing it down. Then what category? So in mine, my category is advertising, marketing, and sales. That's just pretty much where I work, working with clients and working with customers. Do a little bit more leadership training right now, but that's kind of comes in from the side doors. My real focus is advertising, marketing, and sales. But so is hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of other people in my shoes or agencies. So I want to get even more specialized than that. So what do? Strategic brand storytelling. Now, what don't I do? Don't come to me to buy media. I don't do that. Don't come to me for your digital marketing. I don't do that anymore. I used to do all that stuff. Don't come to me for your public relations. Come for me to help you completely establish what your brand story is, the platform that articulates how you're different and more distinctive than your competition and the impact that you have in the world. That's what I do, and that's what separates me from those millions of people above me in that category. So there's still a lot of people now, especially with storytelling becoming the soup du jour, it seems like. What makes me different than those other storytelling coaches out there? And there's lots of them that coach on innovation and leadership and these other things. But mine is really about brand and business development. And so here is my number one specialty. It's a little bit longer than Adelante's, but I want to capture a few things, and then I'm going to dissect this for you. The business of story is the number one resource for leaders of purpose-driven brands to align their people, engage their customers, and build trust in their offering using the proven power of the story cycle system. I got this by simply diving down and going through my industry, my category, my specialty, and it makes me really hone my thinking so that I can, throw that dart at the middle of the dartboard and say, this is what I'm all about. Now, as you're going through this for yourself, here are a couple of elements for you to consider in your final brand position statement, and you might want to write these down on the side of your paper there. So I always like to start, of course, with the name of your brand. What is your brand? And then I throw in there the superlative, the number one resource, because you want to be the go-to person for that one thing. You want to be that number one resource. And what is that? And for who? So for me, I really like to work with leaders of purpose-driven brands. Not interested in brands that are just selling stuff to sell stuff. They got to have an impact. They got to make an impact in the world, in their customers, in their communities, in their employees' lives, because I found those are by far the most successful brands. They make more money than anybody that's just in the world to try to make money. So I want to focus on those that are actually having a true impact in the world. And so when they come to me, what are the benefits? What do they get out of this? Well, align their people, engage their customers, and build trust. Power of three, boom, boom, boom. All about growing and amplifying that impact in the world. And oh, by the way, I am the only provider in the world that has the story cycle system. That is my platform. That is what I've created, and I've been working and teaching training on now for about 15 years. So I got my act together back about the same time that AVEIN did. I was running my ad agency, parking company, and we got really impacted by the global recession. We lost half of our business, and I had to let a number of people go, and I didn't ever want to have to do that again. But in helping AVEIN get through her story, I realized at that point I had to redefine my story. And that's when I really started my pivot out of the advertising agency business and into doing the business of story full time. But you know what? Had business kept going as per usual and good, this frozen turkey would have still been flying in the tornado. It took this major disruption in our lives to rethink who we are and what we do. And that's where we are, and that's what I want you to do right now. So why don't I take a breath here and let's open it up real quick for any conversation. I'm happy if, let me jump over here. If you want to jump on and ask me any questions, or in the chat if you would like to share anything. And then we will jump to the next, my story quest for you. I'm going to show you a foundational narrative framework that you can use for all of your communications, and you can use as you're dialing in your position to lead to your unique value proposition. What makes you different, more distinctive, and therefore better than your competition. So, any questions out there? Anybody like to jump on? Now's not the time to be shy. I mean, what else you got to do? You're hanging out at home? No, I know you got plenty to do. All right, let's see. What is your favorite books for learning this process? I've got them all hanging out back there. Well, number one, what is my favorite book is my new book. You're only seeing the cover of it right now. It'll be out in June, and it takes you through the entire process. I have relied on, tens of 20, 30 different books. I have them on my website at businessofstory.com. If you go into resources, there's a library there. And in that library are the books that I've vetted that I have found to be the most powerful in this process. And they come from Hollywood, they come from marketers, they come from branders, they come from good old-fashioned storytellers. And what all I've done is looked at all of these different resources and people and have connected dots in creating the story cycle system. So there's not one book. It kind of depends on what you're looking for, and then I could lead you to that book. Also on my podcast, I'm coming up on 250 episodes. Throughout those, I've got authors of all these books that I love, and you can hear some of them there. So I wasn't very clear on that, was I? There's any number of them. If you had something in particular, who's that, Sarah, that you're looking for, I could direct you to that book. Stephanie, can you do this without a solid understanding of your competitors? You can, and that's all right. In fact, if you don't have it quite yet, get yourself dialed in first and be sure that it is true to you, of what you really love to do, what you're passionate about, what you're curious about, because that will take you through the good times and the bad, and it'll make you the go-to person. Once you get that down, then go and look at your competition. Figure out who is out there that you're up against and see how they're positioning or not positioning themselves, and it will help inform the kind of brand story that you want to tell to really differentiate yourself in the market. So no, you don't have to wait for your competitors. If this is something that you really want to be doing, then start dialing in your brand story that's true to you, and then go and base it, off of, test it against your competition. All right. Can you drop the link to your book recommendations page? You bet. I'll do that. Remind me, I'll do that at the end of this, so I'm not messing around with all this now, but I will absolutely. And it's just businessofstory.com/resources, pull down menu, library, and there it is, but I'll definitely put it in there. Jeske, am I saying that name right? Jeske. What to do if you want to be of value to different groups of customers. Keep the description in your brand position statement very broad. No. Or choose one group and be specific. Yes. So just 2 days ago, I interviewed for my show. In fact, I was lucky because I recorded the video at the same time, and I'm going to launch that tomorrow, of two of the guys that I think are the most brilliant minds in advertising and marketing, but their insights you can apply to any business. Michael Gass of Fuel Lines and Drew McClellan of the Advertising Marketing Federation. They coach and consult business development in the agency world. Could be design firms, could be ad agencies, could be public relations firms, but any company can use their advice. And here's what they resoundingly said. It's the same thing I heard from Michael Gass back in 2008. You've got to be for one thing. You have to be super focused on who you serve and what it is you do, because in this day and age of this twisted upside down world we're in, clients are looking for specialists. They can't deal with, jacks of all trades, masters of none. It's like thinking about climbing Everest. All right, so you're climbing Everest, you're 2/3 of the way top, and we've just been blasted with an enormous blizzard. Who are you going to reach for to help? Are you going to go to the cook, who's also the chief janitor, or are you going to go to that Sherpa who has weathered these storms before and are particularly good with an ice axe? That's who I'm going for, and that's who your customers are going for now. So when you do this process, when you think about this, I want you to get super focused, hyper focused on that one customer that you serve. What I found, even though it seems like it flies in the face of everything that your body is saying right now, your brain is saying, oh my God, there's not enough business out there. I have to be grasping at everything to bring in some business. That is the exact wrong thing to do. you get focused, you go after that one customer, you get super clear on your brand story, you attract them in, and then what happens? As things start rebounding, all of a sudden these other businesses, these other customers that you're thinking about get in the slipstream and you start attracting them naturally. But you do it only by getting uber focused on that one group and what you do better and more distinctively than anybody else. I cannot underscore that enough, because I made that mistake with my own ad agency back in 2008. We lost 50% of our business, and I started scrambling to go and find whatever I could to keep us afloat. And that was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. It wasn't until I got super focused and then ultimately pivoted into the focus of the business of story that now I'm leading the life of a clear brand story. I'm amplifying my impact around the world. And you know what? My life's gotten a little bit simpler because I do that one thing and I do it really well, and that's what I go for. Thank you, Faustine, for putting that up there. Okay, let's keep going on. I love the questions, so keep them coming. But now what I want to share with you, you're thinking that your first job, of course, is to go through and figure out what your number one specialty is. And by the way, you can do both of these exercises in tandem, and it's going to help reveal what your brand story is to you. So even if you feel like you get through this first part and you're not completely dialed in on what your number one specialty is or your position statement is, just write something down. Get it there. It's a little bit like making a stew. You're carving up, you're throwing in all your ingredients, and then you're going to let it simmer there. And it's going to be simmering in your mind and your brain, and it's going to start coming together as you work through more of these exercises. All right. That one. Moving right along here. So next up, you're working through your position statement. Now I want to teach you the most foundational narrative framework I have ever learned in the branding world and in any world. And I want you to use this as your storytelling dumbbell, to use it in all of your communications to help build your narrative intuition and get you super crystal clear so that you can hack through the noise and hook the hearts of your audiences out there. And it's called this and, but, and therefore. It's at the bottom of your worksheet there, so have it there. But now I'm going to jump away from it for a second because I want to show you why this structure works on us. So we are all Homo sapiens, and we are the only beings that we know of that think and act in story. In fact, that's what separates us from all the other primates. We are just a fraction away of being a chimpanzee, but a chimpanzee cannot think in story, into an imagined reality about what tomorrow could be. They don't think in fiction as we do. And it's our ability to think into fiction to get people to buy into our processes, to what we can make their world better for them tomorrow. And then we got to, of course, deliver on that fiction. So why does it work? Well, our brain, that brain is sitting on top of your melon right there. It takes up 2% of your body mass, and yet it consumes 20% of your calories or your energy. And the fundamental reason why it's so active is purely survival. You know, we sleep, we're telling ourselves stories. We daydream, we're telling ourselves stories. We are sitting in a PowerPoint presentation. If we're confused, we're telling ourselves stories. Our brain is constantly scanning the environment to decide, do I got to fight someone? Do I got to flight away from something? Or is there an opportunity here? It does not stop. So it's constantly spinning and whirring in the background. And when we as communicators come and we don't talk to the brain like it wants to receive information in a problem solution dynamic, it gets confused and it shuts down. What stories do is they paint pictures in our minds. That's why they call it the theater of the mind. Think about any great story you've heard. Someone sits down and tells you, you can get goosebumps. You can start crying. You can feel what's going on. You can picture it. Stories are just memory-making machines. They indelibly stamp on your audiences pictures so that they can remember you and you connect with them emotionally to move them to action. But few people use it in business. It's literally mind-boggling. And the reason I believe is because we come out of business school or we get our first jobs and we want to look smart and we want to sound logical and we want to be rational. And so everybody rewards that. They reward the PowerPoint littered with information and charts and graphs, PowerPoints riddled with bullets. But it's not what our human mind wants. It wants a story to place things in context, to make it easy to digest and make you unbelievably memorable. And I learned this through working with my ad agency for 20 years. It used to be so easy in our business because we had a handful of media to deal with. Our brands literally own the influence of mass media. We had TV, radio, print, outdoor, direct mail, public relations, events, and no Yelp. So our brands own the megaphone. They had, you know, the influence of mass media. They controlled all that. But in 2006, I saw that appreciably change, and that was with the advent of e-commerce, social media, and everything that the internet has come to be. Now, make no mistake, your customers own your brand story. They own my brand story. So we have to make sure they are experiencing the story that we want them to experience it and are sharing the true story about the real world impact we make. And it's a really exciting time to be around because we have now TV station, radio, print, outdoor, all of this from the palm of our hand, 24/7, with international global reach from the quiet and privacy of our kitchen table. Yet everybody else has the exact same thing too. And here's the biggest problem, which I think is so interesting. Our frontal cortex, our brilliance that created this technology that compounds like at the rate of Moore's law, faster and faster, and more information bombarding us every day. Well, you know what? We're hitting our Homo sapiens brethren with all this content, and yet we are still sifting it through our subconscious, our limbic system, the part of our brain that has not appreciably changed in almost 100,000 years, ever since our ancestors were navigating and trying to survive the savannah, is the same brain apparatus that we use to try to navigate and survive the internet. And that's why our messages don't work. That's why we don't cut through, because people don't think in story and use this problem solution dynamic to get it through. Now, this is hugely important for your brand, because as you figure out what your core position statement is, what you do differently and more distinctively than your competition, you need to tell that story in such a crisp way that somebody can understand it immediately. I call it the one floor elevator pitch. You won't make them work for it. They will immediately get it, and you'll give them chills. They will literally tingle. So I learned about this from a number of different places, but this is one of my favorite books. Jonathan Gottschall's The Storytelling Animal. I found this when our youngest son was going through some brain surgery when he was a little kid. And when, of course, my wife and I were very freaked out about all that. And he has since, he got through it and he's doing great. And now he's a big kid, 6'4", 26 years old, living up in Vegas. But I found this when I was doing research on encephalitis and the brain. And it was like the universe gifted this to me, because two worlds came together. It was, I needed to try to understand the brain world, and I needed to understand the storytelling world better as I was really starting to work and teach in this. The Storytelling Animal, How Stories Make Us Human. Jonathan Gottschall, a brilliant writer, so much fun this book is to read. It covers the intersection of brain structure and story structure, and how you think of it this way. If your brain is the motherboard that drives your entire body, it's your hard drive, stories are the software that make it happen. And like any user interface, if you give it a crap story, it doesn't know what to do with it, and it just, it flights, it leaves. But if you have just that right code and story, then your audience's brain is not making up a story about you. They get it. You connect with them. It delivers a picture in their brain, and then they share it with others. Let me show you what I learned in this book. So in it, he talks about this study called the Heider-Simmel study, and I'm going to put you through it here in just a second. Heider-Simmel, they were sociologists back in 1946, and they created this very short little film here that I'm going to show you, and it was a study of people's perceptions and how those perceptions impact behavior. Nothing more than that. Now, this film is rather crude compared to the marvelous production quality we're all used to now, but it still makes its point. So let's take a quick look at this. And don't worry, there's no sound. All right, pretty crazy, huh? When I show that, it doesn't matter where I am around the world, all Homo sapiens react more or less the same way, and they come up with some really fabulous stories when I ask them what they see going on. So maybe a number of you, the top story I typically hear is like struggle. It could be a playground bully trying to take control of some other kids, and the other two kids kind of come together and they pull a fast one on the bully and escape, and then the bully goes berserk and tears the place apart. I've heard the same sort of thing told about a dad who's the big triangle, and his daughter is dating someone that he doesn't like, and he tries to keep them apart, and it doesn't work, and then he goes berserk. Kind of a Romeo and Juliet thing, if you will. I've heard kids chasing butterflies with nets. I've heard more abstract things. One person said, oh, it's just a metaphor for thinking outside of the box. So it's really incredible when I show this. And if I have 140 people in the room, 139 of them will create a story in their mind as to what was going on there. One of them won't. They'll just say, I just saw a bunch of stuff floating around the screen, which is actually the right answer. But did you see how your brain had to create and knit together a story to try to make meaning out of the utter meaningless? There are no faces, there's no dialogue, there was no music. It was just, floating squares and diamonds that are, what am I trying to say? Elements coming at you. Now it was edited to maybe suggest something, but it's amazing the amount of different kinds of stories that I get out of it. And yet the same thing happens to pretty much everybody, is they have to invent a story. So what happens when you're communicating about your brand, or if you are leading that PowerPoint littered with bullets, graphs, charts, and stats without setting the context through story? What happens is your audience will leave with a different story, not the story you intended, unless you intentionally tell a story. And it's not their fault. They can't help it. We all can't help it, because we fabricate these fictions to try to make sense of the madness of being human beings. So your job, my job, is to make it as simple as possible to like mesmerize your audience. So they go, oh, I get it. You didn't make me work for it. Totally get it. I'm on board. What do we do next? This is the power of the and, but, and therefore narrative framework. It is so simple, and looking at it, it takes a little while to practice it to get it down. But when you use it, this applied, an example of the applied science, when you use this, you will absolutely bewitch your audiences. I've seen this used when I taught this at ASU for 5 years in an executives master's program. I taught this overall course, a year-long course to executives from around the world. And one of the things that came out of that was a surprise to me is that they would come to me and say, I use this and, but, and therefore in all my email writing now. And it's done a couple of amazing things for me. Number one, it's shortened my time to write an email by about 2/3. my audience, my readers are actually saying, I don't know what you're doing, man, but now I finally understand what you're talking about, because he just gets right to the point and it's super crystal clear. And it ultimately simplifies everybody's life. There are those three words again. Story, intentional storytelling clarifies a story. It amplifies your impact, your influence, your sales, your persuasion, and it ultimately simplifies your life because it gets you on a very focused, dedicated vision mission. What are the elements of the and button therefore? You set the context here, and then you raise the stakes. But here is where you state the problem. You want to insert conflict or contradiction. This is the problem you are solving for, that you and your brand are solving for, that are of keen interest to your specific audience. And then the therefore. This is how you solve it. Oh, there we go. This, when I found this about 7 years ago, I realized that this was the single most powerful form in core brand communication that I had ever found. And I was introduced to it by a very interesting guy, Dr. Randy Olson. Dr. Olson and I have become fast friends since this. This dude is a PhD, Harvard PhD evolutionary biologist who after 20 years gave up tenure, went to Hollywood, went to USC Film School, graduated, produced 3 documentaries on climate change and global warming, but has written 4 books to help scientists to teach them how to use story and narrative structure to do a better job of communicating their big ideas. I read his second book called Connection, and it was there that I was introduced to the and button therefore. And from a brander standpoint, even though he was writing to scientists from an evolutionary biologist way, I got it immediately. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a secret key in the branding world. Does it really work? And I have found it works exceptionally well. So I called Randy. Like I said, he and I have become fast friends. And in fact, I'm teaching a course with him right now, a 10-week Story Circles course that is nothing but the and button therefore. And we have 50 scientists in it. So it's really fascinating from a brand standpoint to see how that analytic science mind works around narrative. But here, and I've had him on my show, I don't know, 4 times now. You can see how I've simply used the ABT right here in my Instagram. Most executives communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, use the universal narrative structure of the ABT to excel through the stories you tell. I could make that even simpler by saying most executives communicate and care, but bore. So tell a friggin' story because it cuts through the noise and it hooks the hearts of your audiences. Now, Randy, as smart as he is, found this in the most interesting place. You might recognize this character. Hartman. Matt Stone and Trey Parker, have written and produced South Park, one of the longest running TV series in all of TV, second longest running animation series only to The Simpsons. And the fascinating thing about them is if there's a new South Park happening, coming on, airing this Sunday, they are literally in animation right now. They write and produce these shows in 6 weeks. And there's a great video on YouTube called 6 Weeks to Air. Well, they'll tell you in that Trey Parker talks about the rule of replacement. And when a story isn't working, they take out ands and they replace them with buts and therefores. Because and is the exposition. It's what sets the stage for the audience, but you don't want to spend too much time there. You want to get to the but here's the problem. Here's the contradiction. Here's the conflict to get your audience involved. And therefore we need to do this, but then this happened. And therefore they did that, but then this happened. And it has this ping pong match between the and, but, and therefore, really focused on the buts and the therefores. To me, I thought it was just so fascinating. It made so much sense, but I didn't completely believe it when I first learned about it. So I started looking, where in history have we seen this model before? Well, all you gotta do is look at pretty much any nursery rhyme, and it is set up in an and, but, and therefore. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider who sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Now you can see the core narrative elements in this simple little thing. Even though the words aren't there, the thought is, the narrative structure is. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet and ate her curds and whey. But along came a spider who sat down beside her, therefore frightened Miss Muffet away. So you can see, you can look at virtually any nursery rhyme. It's set up in this dynamic of setup, problem, resolution. Act 1 is the and, Act 2 is the but, Act 3 is the therefore. It works for your brand too. What do your customers want, and why is it important to them? But why don't they have it? But what's the big chasm that they've got to cross to get it? And therefore, what's your answer to help them get it? So where else did I see the ABT? Kept doing some more digging. Well, by golly, the Gettysburg Address is the perfect ABT. Lincoln starts out fourscore years ago, which, by the way, is just another way of saying once upon a time, because he was just a marvelous, marvelous storyteller. 80 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. That's all Lincoln said to set up the Gettysburg Address. But now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure, so on and so forth. Therefore, here's what we got to do about it. We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Setup, problem, resolution, and, but, and therefore. Here's the most surprising thing about this finding to me. I didn't know this. Lincoln was not the keynote address that day at Gettysburg. He actually spoke in second place, believe it or not. Do any of you know who the keynote address was? Most people don't. I didn't until I researched this. It was a gentleman by the name of Edward Everett, former Secretary of State and now at this time a self-proclaimed orator. Everett spoke for 2 hours. Do you know how long the Gettysburg Address was? 2 minutes. And yet those 2 minutes are probably one of the most iconic addresses ever given by any leader anywhere in the world. And it had this beautiful narrative structure of and, but, therefore. In our worlds of communication and branding and understanding who we are and who we service and how we articulate that to them, we need to really adopt this structure so that you can do in a 1-floor elevator pitch, say exactly who you're for and why that's important, but here's the problem that you're solving on their behalf, and here's how you solve that problem. It does something else for you. It gets you start really thinking about what your core story is to make this work. That's a beautiful thing. It's like a workout. You just keep writing this ABT over and over again to get focused on your position statement. Because I'm telling you, it is everywhere, and our audiences digest this nonstop. They just don't know it. Carly Rae Jepsen. Any Carly Rae Jepsen fans out there? Well, this particular, you call me maybe, video has over 1 billion views. Check out the chorus. Hey, I just met you. Sing along if you like. And this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. And, but, and therefore. So is she somewhat of a one-hit wonder because they use the ABT in the chorus? May well be. Did her lyricists or her know about the ABT? No, they're just, intuitively, innately strong storytellers. They just kind of get that part of their world. What I want you to know is you are an innate intuitive storyteller too, because you are literally a storytelling monkey, as I am. It is what makes us uniquely human. And I'm just trying to get you to move, to evolve from being an intuitive storyteller to an intentional one, using the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling. So you've got that PDF we sent out, hopefully. If not, you can also order books from the website here, businessofstory.com/tools. And it takes you through 3 of the structures. Only one of them we're really talking about today, and that's the ABT. But in it too, as you work through it, I want you to see where I model it in here as well. So it's all set up that you can easily write through it and start working on your ABT. But I use it. You can insert an and here when I'm talking about, you and I are visual beings, and we tell vivid stories to project indelible images in the theater of mind, so on and so forth. But here's the problem. Storytelling is hard unless you become an intentional storyteller, meaning you practice it every single day. Therefore, this is what this book is all about. Setup, problem, resolution. It is like the perfect way to position, to set the context for any of your messaging. It's really fun to work with on Twitter because it makes you think, and but therefore, very simply, if you're trying to get someone to click through to that link, give them a big but as to why. What are you solving for in that link? And therefore, their answer is to click through. But use this in all of your work. I want to show you on our Facebook group. By the way, I've got a private Facebook group. You're more than welcome to come and join us. It's Business of Storytelling for Leaders of Purpose-Driven Brands. And I had this guy, Eric Relea, connect with me on it. I never met Eric. I know he's been in the group for a couple of years, and he sent me this note because he was kind of struggling through his ABT. He says, I took a stab at applying the ABT. Oh, let me go back here a second. Took a stab at applying the ABT method. Feels a bit like I'm using circular logic, which sometimes happens because you're so close to your proficiencies, to your expertise, that it is the curse of the expert. So here he starts writing this kind of convoluted one. There are literally millions of people, patients, non-patients alike, who are ashamed of or unhappy with their smile and not able to find an easy, painless, and affordable way to regain the life-changing confidence to smile. All right, set up way too long. Act one, way too long. He's throwing in too many different things in here. He's already kind of starting to give you a solution, and we're not there yet. So he wants you to get really super concise, but specific in all of this. So then he goes, but small transitions is easy, painless, and affordable. So now he's giving you the therefore in his but section. It fits right over your own teeth, and is thin and strong and blah, 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 blah. So this is where circular logic is coming in. He's kind of already touched on this. He's wanting to get to the sale up top, and then he sells you again in the but, and then he sells you for a third time in the therefore, but he hasn't really effectively and concisely stated the problem. So he sent it to me and he goes, I'm confused. What do I do now? And I've done this for so long. And as you do it and get better at it, if you're in the marketing communications world in particular, helping with your clients, using this ABT structure with them to help them clarify their thinking is hugely powerful. So he sent this to me, and within about a minute or two, I get back to him and I said, here's the ABT. Nothing lights up a room like a beautiful smile. And millions of people wish they could enhance their teeth, but they think it's difficult, painful, and expensive. Therefore, small transitions is the fastest, most affordable way to restore your pearly whites and brighten your confidence. So what have I done here? Just set the stage, a statement of agreement up top. Nothing lights up a room like a beautiful smile. Like nobody's going to argue that with you. And I'm going to raise the stakes. And millions of people wish they could enhance their teeth. So set the context, raise the stakes. But here's the problem. They think it's difficult, painful, and expensive. Boom, boom, boom. Therefore, Smile Transitions, the brand, is the fastest, most affordable way to restore your pearly whites and brighten your confidence. Now, if I come up to you and I just say, hey, have you ever heard of Smile Transitions? It's the fastest, most affordable way to restore your pearly whites and brighten your confidence. Also, what I'm selling, but I haven't connected emotionally in any way, shape, or form, nor have I given them an appreciation that I understand and empathize with their problem. This is what I want your ABTs to look like. I want you to get them to be this tight. He writes back, wow, thank you. Now I get it. And me being the smart aleck I am, I had to write one more ABT. Finding your theme is often like pulling teeth, painful and messy, but I found the ABT to be the Smile Transitions of branding. Therefore, story on my hashtag. Do you get how that works? And, but, and therefore. One more quick example here. Here's the Business of Story ABT. And I've got all sorts of them all over the place, depending on who my audience is and who I'm talking to. For you today, here's just one I drafted yesterday afternoon, pulling this together. You have an important brand story to tell, and it needs to be crystal clear to make the impact you seek. But you suffer from messaging malaise, as we all do, until we get super clear. Therefore, I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the primal power of storytelling to help leaders of purpose-driven brands hack through the noise and hook the hearts of your customers. By the way, the more contrast you can create between your and statement and your but statement, the longer your audience will give you for your answer, for your solution, for how you deliver on that. So you want to create as much contrast and conflict between those first two, and then they'll give you as much time as you like to say, and here's how I can help you get through that. This, by the way, all leads to what is my unique value proposition. So to get to that UVP, I've done a few things here, and I've taken you through 2 of the 3 steps to get to the UVP. First one is to identify what you do that is different, more distinctive than your competition. And then number 2, articulate it. Write an ABT around that, or write several ABTs around it. Even put your number 1 target audience in the very beginning of that ABT to get you focused. Who are they and what do they want, but why don't they have it? And therefore, how do you solve that for them? I want you to do all that together, because as you start writing this stuff, like I talked about that stew metaphor, you throw the ingredients in, you let it simmer and percolate, and then you eat it that evening and it's delicious, but it's not until you put it in the refrigerator and come back to it in day 2 or 3 that it's all come together and you're like, oh, this is really good now. Well, that's what happens in this process too. You kind of work through it and you just let it gestate. And I want you to ultimately get to, what is your unique value proposition? Mine for the business of story is simply to help you excel through the stories you tell. That's my whole thing in the world, because I had just found the power of storytelling, the power of these applied frameworks is just bewitching. It's beyond my imagination. So that's the basic structure of it. Set the context, raise the stakes, state the problem you solve for, and then boom, how do you solve it? And how does that make you more different and distinctive than your competition? The rest of my program is basically based around the 10-step story cycle system that I created based off Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And this is where my whole journey started. Back in 2006, I started studying. We had our middle child, our son, going to film school at Chapman University in Orange, California, and he's been in Hollywood ever since as a director of virtual reality projects. But while he was there, I said, send me your books when you're done with them, since I'm paying for them, because I want to learn, what does Hollywood teach you to be a competitive storyteller in the most competitive storytelling market in the world, LA? And in doing so, I learned about Joseph Campbell from the hero's journey. I'm like, oh my God, why don't we use a similar structure to create brand stories, to humanize brand stories, and to get leaders super connected and focused with their purpose in the world? And that's what the business of story is all about. You can take advantage of it. I launched a new online course before this whole COVID thing when I was at Social Media Marketing World. I speak there every year. And in March, I launched the new totally interactive online course that takes you through the 10 steps of the story cycle system to get you focused on your brand story. And in each one of those chapters, I also teach you a storytelling technique, because I found that it's not just enough to know and have your story dialed in and clarified. You got to know how to tell it. And so these are using proven narrative frameworks and story structures that you can use in all of your online marketing, offline, inbound, connecting with audiences, connecting with your customers. And I've got a special 50% off discount right now, given this twisted, troubling times we are in, that you can take advantage of it by May 15th. And here's the thing, you can take the first chapter is absolutely free. You don't have to put in a credit card, no nothing. You can take it, you can try it out, you can see how it works for you. And then if you feel like this is gonna be right for you, then jump in and do the rest of it. And all I ask is you go through that first chapter, let me know what you think of it. Let me know how it works for you. Or if I can help you clarify something, just shoot me an email and I can maybe clarify it through an email, or I can jump on a call with you. But my hope is to help as many leaders of purpose-driven brands grow their influence, their personal power, and the impact of their companies for the betterment of everyone, using the power of storytelling, because they just don't teach this anywhere in the modern world. It connects people. It helps you understand and empathize with your audiences. And by God, we could use understanding and empathy in this world now more than ever. And your brand can be that. Your brand can be that for your customers and be the first brand that they think about. What happens when you do this, I've seen it time and time again, you can actually dramatically decrease your marketing budget, because you will have such compelling stories and your customers will be experiencing them that they will share them with their world. So you will be benefiting from the most powerful form of advertising, and that's free word of mouth marketing. It also amplifies your impact internally with your organization and or with your customers, because you are so focused and you make it so easy for them to understand what you stand for, that it makes you stand out when you get your story dialed in. And then it ultimately simplifies everyone's lives, because you're not grasping at all these different markets and trying to do this and running down that rabbit hole and whatever. No. What happens is when you dial in your brand story, your vision gets super clear, your mission gets super directed, and you start saying no to all of those things that took you off of your core mission and your core purpose. And it just makes life way easier and makes you a lot more money, I've found. So in all this, I'm going to show you one more slide, then I'll jump off and answer any of your questions. As you're going through this and as you are looking at your story and learning how to tell it and move from that innate storyteller to that intentional storyteller, I want you to keep this in mind. Always remember that the most potent story you ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. So happy to be here with you. Now I'm going to jump over and answer any of your questions. All right, I know I threw a lot at you. I'm getting a little hoarse. I got my tea here to get me through it. Any questions from you? I'll pull this up here and see what we've got. And if you like to, Faustine, if it's all right, I mean, if they just want to turn on their microphone and ask a question, we don't have that many people here that happy to just answer them live for everybody.
Yes, so if you do have a question and if you would like to answer it live, just go ahead and raise your hand and make sure your microphone is ready. We can give you permission to talk, or allow you to talk, as what Zoom would say. Anybody brave out there? Oh, look, we have one. Let me see if I can navigate this. So, Sarah, you're on now.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Park. Thank you so much for doing this today. It's I'm right in the middle of rewriting my story, since this is the time to do it.
Yep.
And so I am an artist and moving into a new area, and so I want to retell my story. So and I was asking earlier about the books that you read, and I've been taking notes like mad. So what is your advice for someone who is just starting, or do you have any advice for someone who's just starting down this path, or there's some advice that you received from someone long ago that you still rely on today to guide you in staying focused on how to tell your best story?
Yeah. Now, it's going to sound trite, and you've probably heard this a million times, but it couldn't be more true now than ever, is do what you love doing. Follow your passion and your curiosity, because those are where your talents are going to lie. That's what is going to take you really deep that your competitors aren't willing to go there. And it's what is going to make you rise up above. I'm a case in point. You know, when I wound down my agency, I was 55. And I had all kinds of people going like, what the hell are you doing? Why would you do that? Why didn't you sell it to someone? Well, I didn't want to sell it to someone because I would have been enslaved by them for 5 years, and I would have missed 5 years in building this out. It's not always been easy, but it's what I love to do. It's what my calling is. So if what you're doing, the pivot that you're making is really what you're about, and you're like all in, then you're winning right there. That's your foundation. Now, the tricky part is, how do you tell that story? And here's what I found that works. Think of three, they always come in threes to me, whatever. Think of 3 times in your life, moments, and it could have been when you were a youngster, it could have been in high school, college, it could have been the other day, that like they were at the time sort of insignificant moments you thought, but in hindsight, it has had a tremendous impact and has shaped and formed who you are today. I find that when you start weaving those scenes together, your story actually finds you. In fact, I did a TEDx on this about 2 years ago, TEDx Gilbert, you can look it up. And that was for the 20-something sitting in that audience, who a lot of them weren't living their own story. They were living mom and dad's stories or someone else's story of what they ought to be when what they really want to be was this. And so I think the best advice I got on that is find those little moments in your life that have shaped who you are today in this new enterprise. that, you know, is expressing itself through this new enterprise. Capture that story, those stories, and I think you'll start finding your brand story will start kind of writing itself. It'll start emerging before your very eyes.
Oh,
I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what I would do.
yes, that's amazing. Great help. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. By the way, I'm curious, what kind of artwork are you getting into?
So I am a graphic recorder. So I live draw as people talk. You probably have seen them before.
Yep.
And I am pivoting into broadening the use of my own creativity, because I feel like I've come a long way in developing myself and my own creativity. And now I would like to figure out how to tell the story of my journey and how it has led me to this great space that I'm in, because I'm in a very good spot right now. And how the journey of my life could be helpful to other people.
It's like
figuring out how to pivot.
I love the meta of that. So you take the time to illustrate these meetings and what's going on, and now you want to take your own life to illustrate what it could be for someone else.
Yes.
I love that. That's great. I think that's a really interesting approach to business.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Another question. Someone here, Stephanie asked, should I expect my brand story to be different or the same as my personal purpose? How are they related or not? I think they're related, that if you are aligned, if your personal purpose is what you are about in the business world, I think that's the easiest way to go through life, isn't it? Because you're not like having to deal with two psychologies here. You know, personally, I'm about this, but really over here, now in business, I'm trying to do this. I know I've been there. I've done that same thing myself. And I just think if you can align those two worlds, you are way ahead of the game, because so many leaders and so many of your competition out there are being pulled in two separate directions. And that's time consuming. It's exhausting. It leads to a malaise. You have this dissonance in your brain about, well, my one brain says this, but I got to do this to make money. Now, if you can align those two worlds, man, you are so much ahead of the game. So I would really highly recommend. They might not be articulated exactly the same, but they absolutely should complement each other. Let's see, how often, Stephanie, again, how often should we expect to have to rework our brand story? Is it something that'll continue to shift every 6 and no, and should stay stable, remote stable? So you want to find that story. It's that overall brand narrative, if you will, of who you are. It's true to who you are. And now your life is going to shift and it's going to change a little bit as you go. And that story is going to mutate just a little bit. But think about it like any of the movie series out there. James Bond. Let's take James Bond, for instance. I mean, they've got like 27 movies out in that franchise. It's essentially the same arc for every movie. It's just different characters doing different things. But it doesn't all of a sudden break into The Sound of Music. It doesn't break into a horror movie. It doesn't break into a comedy, slapstick comedy. You know, they are true to what their overall brand story narrative arc is. That's what the story cycle system helps you do, is really helps you understand that. And then as you come out with sequels and whatever, you may tell some different stories and some different genres, but they are all going to support this overall brand narrative arc that is about you personally and professionally and the purpose that you are driven by. So no, if you feel like you have to change your brand story every 9 months, you're in trouble. You should never invest that brand story in the first place. That brand story should stand the test of time, and only occasionally will market dynamics require you to tweak something here, adjust something there. That happens with every journey. That's cool, but the foundation of that story should remain the same. Jim, my brand is the lazy manager. I like you, Jim. And I simplify business management so that business owners can skip the mistakes and take more breaks and still achieve remarkable results that your parents will be proud of. I like that. And your competitors will envy. Like that too. What are your thoughts? I think that's fun. I like the juxtaposition of laziness and industriousness. That's why I call myself the world's most industrious storyteller, because I like to measure the impact. But you can't be lazy when you do that. Yet you're saying there's like a secret handshake, or there's a magic trick here that I could do to help take a lot of that grief and that anxiousness and that exhaustion out of your life and let you play off of getting a little bit lazier. You're not really getting lazier, you're just working smarter, but achieving greater results that even mom and dad would be proud of and your competitors would envy. I like it a lot. And Jim has a good example here of what I always look for too, is what is the story tension? He's built tension here. How can a lazy manager actually be productive? Well, he's got some secret sauce to make that happen. I'm sure he's got the case stories that says, and here's what I've done to help grow companies. It creates a little bit of that doubt in our brain, or that cognitive dissonance that we're begging for an answer. Really? Can that really happen? And of course, I'm sure Jim's got the answer for that too. So I like that. I like if you can find story tension in what you do out there in the world, you are way ahead of the game. Yeah, a good book on that is a book called Hitmakers. And in it, Derek Thompson, a writer for The Atlantic, talks about these hits, these big popular hits from Brahms' Lullaby, believe it or not, to Rock Around the Clock, to modern day stuff. And he talks about the need to have familiarity and surprise, and how important familiarity and surprise is. What Jim's done here is given us this familiarity of this idea of management and how do you get, great results, but the surprise is, and be lazy at the same time. There's just that fun thing there. So that's another book I highly recommend. I had Derek on the show about 5 months ago, maybe, and we talked about this whole concept of familiarity and novelty on the business of story. So great question. Mahan, does your brand narrative change to adjust to the current crisis, or do you just leave that out? I don't think your brand narrative changes, because it really is who you are. It's how you show up in this world. I think what you do is you're sensitive, and you may tell stories and connect with people off of your main brand framework, but be caring about it, be authentic about it, be sensitive about it. I don't want to see people completely changing their personalities, because that's not true. I want you to always be true to who you are and what you stand for, and how you can be of service and help to people right now and into the future. So no, I don't see the stories changing appreciably. It's how deftly you tell them in this time of need. That's where the secret sauce is. All right, did I miss anybody here? I think I got everybody. I want to be sensitive to your time. I know we have about an hour and a half here. Any last questions from anybody? And feel free, if you like, to jump on with your microphone. Has this been helpful for you? And I'd just like to, again, share that if I can be of service to you, over here on the online course, a lot of people are using it. They're really liking it. And I'm making myself available literally to everybody that goes on to it at no additional cost, just to help answer any questions as you go through it. Would love to help you in it. I take you through it. There's a lot of video tutorial in it, but there's also really simplified reading that you don't even have to watch the tutorials. You could read through it, and it's going to ask you and take you by the hand to have you fill in a PDF, which is a total interactive PDF. You'll download that in chapter 2, and it'll help you wrangle all of your story elements. And then I do the video trainings, as I mentioned, and I give you the storytelling tips and techniques and structures all the way through. And by the time you're all said and done, I guarantee that you will have your brand story dialed in. If you don't like it for some reason, for whatever reason, I will give you a 100% refund. My job, my mission in life is to help people connect their purpose with the world, because I think it benefits everybody. And I've learned the only way to do that is through really powerful, compelling storytelling that makes you memorable, makes you the go-to resource, so that you can do the good work in the world that you're trying to do out there. And I'm all for you. I'm here to help. So just let me know.
So I think that's all the questions that we have that we see in chat. If you have any additional questions that we didn't answer, I can definitely forward it to Park so he can answer them directly. But thank you again, Park, for taking time out of your busy day to share your useful knowledge, expertise, and this structure of how to tell your business story during this time. And during any time, of course, of your business, it's a remarkable technique and a strategy that all businesses definitely need to take advantage. But thank you again. And if you miss any part of this recording, it will be posted on events.bbcommunity.org. Thank you everyone for attending, and please stay safe out there.
Thank you.